How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 291 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week we're looking at what to sow in the month of September. So, this episode is going out the last day or two of August. And as we look ahead to the month ahead of September, we're looking at what we can sow in the vegetable garden. Now, this episode or this sowing guide is likely to be the last one in terms of, we're unlikely to do one in October or November because the seed sowing has been reducing, significantly, and this month it really tapers off, and the opportunities, the list that we can sow is very small from here on. And September, I guess, is a month that often gets overlooked. I've said that before. It's a month where it's getting to the point where a lot of people kind of write off the year and just park it for now. But there's huge opportunities again, just along the same lines as what we were saying in August. There's huge opportunities now to sow and to keep utilizing your space. So we'll get into the kind of list of what we can sow in a minute. Now it is quite short, it's going to be probably a relatively short episode as such because the list itself is short. There is valuable seeds that we can be sown and valuable harvest that we can have later on down the line, but the list is generally small. Hence, as I say, this will be the last one of these sowing guides for this year. We will, of course, I mentioned last week that we might do a grow along on perennials, and that's looking likely. A couple of people have messaged saying that, yeah, they'd like that or that would be interesting. So I think we'll do that because we've mentioned before perennials, it's the month of September and October are superb months to sow perennial seed. And that will give you, it basically mean that you'll have fully fledged perennial plants to go into your borders next, kind of next spring. So huge opportunity to do that, and yeah, likely to do a grow along. In terms of the week that has just gone, huge harvest, absolutely huge harvest still in the gardens. I think everybody's kind of having, generally speaking, bumper crops of most things. Fruit, particularly this year, is really having a phenomenal year. I guess, we've had quite a bit of warm weather and reasonable amounts of sunshine all summer, and so we're seeing the true value of fruit. We didn't have any late frosts too much either earlier in the year, which can be a big factor in determining how the crops fare out towards the end of the year. And they were, late frosts were quite kind, generally speaking, around the country. And because of that, then we do have, we are seeing very good crops of, of apples, of pears, of plums, all the different berries, raspberries, and all the different fruits essentially are delivering really good harvest, and that's great to see. Out from that, main crop potatoes. I'm getting some messages from listeners this week about main crop potatoes sort of finishing and the foliage naturally dying off, and that's probably there's probably a combination of things happening there. We've had this period of dry weather, and potatoes, particularly if they weren't getting a good bit of water, and I know some people do water, but to water potatoes in the ground is going to take a lot of water. So generally speaking, they might be getting a little bit to keep them going, but they're going to need a lot of water in terms of bulking out the potatoes, and so the plant itself sort of can reach its natural end of cycle fairly quick, if the weather has been as dry for as long as it has. You're also seeing a lot of trees dropping leaves at the moment. And again, that's, people are saying the autumn's coming quickly, and to a certain extent it is, but a lot of the leaf drop that we're seeing at the moment on things like trees is down to the lack of moisture over a period of months. And because there's been a lack of moisture over a period of months, the tree is sacrificing up on top and it's dropping some of these leaves. And that's as a result of that long dry period. Trees, when they get that type of challenge of dry weather over a period of several years, you can actually, the tree itself can become under pressure over a couple of years. But a lot of people mentioning that leaf drop is happening, and that is generally as a result of the dry weather. Now, certainly around here, and I don't know what it's like where you're listening, but certainly where I am, coincidentally, I live about ten miles away from Electric Picnic, which is a big festival which kicks off this weekend. And everyone's eagerly watching the weather to know, is it going to be nice for the concerts, for the festival, for the camping, particularly anyone in tents, they're watching that. But certainly in the last week we've had nice falls of rain, and there is quite a lot of rain expected over the next couple of days and over the weekend and into next week. So, for anyone with an eye on the electric picnic, it's going to be a concern, especially if you're in one of these little tents. But anyway, here's hoping. Rain in the garden has been very, very welcome for most people. There's, everything has been dry. And as a result of things being dry, certainly flowers and fruit have benefited hugely from that, because I don't think they've ever looked as well. But now that the rain is coming back, or some level of rain is coming back, we're going to see rain, kind of some level of rain every day for the next week, according to the weather. And that then sort of changes, the things that we should and need to do in the garden. And, things like fruit, I was mentioning, the likes of raspberries and so on. As the rain comes, they can get moldy quite quickly. So you want to be getting them, as soon as they're just ready, get them off the plants, and don't allow them to sit in moisture at all. Same goes for flowers and deadheadings. A lot of perennials are absolutely at their peak now. And things like dahlias, when you get a flower that's going over, especially when you get rain, that rain can hold onto the flower that's gone over. It sort of falls over onto the next flower and causes that one to rot quicker. So be deadheading as well on anything that you're looking to, any beds or borders or hanging baskets or planters that you're looking to keep looking well for the next number of months. Make sure you're deadheading, especially during the wet periods, because the need to deadhead increases when you have moisture and the plants are sitting wet. So very, very welcome on many fronts, and it just means that you kind of have to tweak a few things that you're doing. So to get into the seed sowing list, as I said, it's going to be quite short. We're predominantly looking at, salad leaves and salad crops at this time of the year. And they're hugely welcome when that harvest comes, deep into the winter months. To have fresh salads to be able to harvest is really, really welcome. But it's also things like herbs that, can be added to all those party winter dishes that we typically cook. And then even, within a polytunnel or a greenhouse, you still have the ability to grow and to sow seeds that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So let's get into the list. So this on the salad front first, it's a lot of, as I said, those winter hardy salad crops. You're looking at things like clatonia, lettuce. Again, you're looking at predominantly loose leaf lettuce at this time of the year. Going to stay away from the really tight heads, the iceberg type. You're going to stay away from those, and you're looking for loose lettuce. And I suppose there's a few varieties that are kind of well suited to that. You're looking at things like Arctic King. You're looking at Winter Density. There's Marvel of Four Seasons. They're all winter suitable, winter hardy varieties of lettuce, and can be sold perfectly now. And again, as I mentioned last month, don't be afraid to sow a little bit more, because than you usually would, because the the chances of any of these running to seed, it doesn't happen anywhere near as quickly as it would, say, all through the summer months. So in the summer months, we're doing little and often, because there's always the possibility of whatever we're sowing running to seed quickly because of high temperatures and whatnot. So at this stage of the year, you can actually sow a bit more. The growth is slower. The temperatures don't reach as high with less sunlight, and that's decreasing all the time. So it gives us the ability to, or for crops to hold way, way longer. So you can sow a lot more than you would typically sow at this time of the year. So lettuce, then you're looking at the kind of the oriental style salad leaves, I guess, things like tatsai, rocket, mustard, corn salad, any of those, kind of oriental type vegetables you can sow. They're all hardy. The likes of rocket, I don't sow. I've mentioned before, I've perennial rocket. So I just keep harvesting that all the time. A couple of times a year, it kind of pushes out a yellow flower, and you just keep cutting them off, and then you get a flush of new growth. So perennial rocket is, it's a brilliant one. But for anyone sowing annual rocket, ordinary rocket, it's perfect at this time of the year. So lots of it. Mustard, tatsai, all of those the same. So oriental style salad leaves. They tend to be a little bit spicier, but they're a really, really nice addition to any of your salads or cooking at this time of the year. Spring onions, again, you're switching to your sort of winter hardy ones. So winter varieties, the Japanese bunching varieties. There's several of them out there, and even White Lisbon, which is the main one, you get a winter version of White Lisbon, and that's a brilliant one to sow at this time of the year. And again, you can sow lots of them. They're not going to run to seed. They'll hold pretty much, outside or outside under cover, or even in a greenhouse. They're going to hold. If you don't harvest them, they're going to stay grown away. They won't look to run to seed, and you'll harvest them right through until next spring. So do sow lots of them at this stage of the year, and fill up the space and use them over the coming months. Chard is another one. Again, a few plants of that are going to do you. So if you have 6 plants, that's probably going to do you all year. Again, it can be used for salads, but generally better, you can use the stalks in things like stews, and they can be sautéed on a pan. And chard is probably one of the most underrated vegetables in the garden, I think. And it's certainly one that, that I like, especially over that winter period. Some of the herbs are still good to be sown because the temperatures are still quite warm. A lot of seeds are still going to germinate. It's just whether you can actually get them to, I suppose, maturity, or get them to do anything at this stage of the year. You don't want them sitting little miserable things all over the winter. So it's whether you can get any sort of growth into them basically through the month of September. That's key. If you can get growth into them at that stage, then you're more likely going to get a harvest of them. But the herbs, you're looking at coriander, chervil, dill, even parsley can be sowed at this time of the year. And, they'll give you some herbs for cooking, but also herbs that you can add to salads as well. So that's definitely worth doing. You can also, if you can find them, you can sow for growing on in the polytunnel or greenhouse. You can sow again some of your brassica types, so cauliflower, calabrese, kale even. You can grow them on in the polytunnel at this time of the year, and you'll have a harvest then next spring off those. So they're worth doing as well. Small sowings. Beetroot, typically you can't, but inside polytunnel or greenhouse again, and potentially even some carrots. You might get, as I say, with the temperatures being warm at the moment, you should get quick germination. You should be able to get a little bit of growth into them before sort of the light levels really drop through the end of October. And if you can get that growth into them now, then you will be able to get a harvest on them. And when you get that harvest can depend on a couple of things, temperature and so on. But you will definitely, if you get germination and good growth into them over the next sort of 6 weeks, you will definitely be able to, get a good harvest at some point in time. Um, the other thing that you can do this month is you can sow or plant your autumn onion sets. So garlic will come later on in November, but at the moment, towards the end of the month, you can plant your onions. And said again, these are going to be, the winter hardy varieties. So it's a brilliant, brilliant one to plant at this stage of the year. They're planted into the ground outside, and they will give you, or in the polytunnel. So I've done it in the polytunnel as well. And they will give you the very, very first crop of next year, which typically is going to be in May time. So you'll get a full harvest of onions in May, and then you'll get your subsequent harvest through June and July from your other onion sets or your sowings from next spring. So really, really worthwhile doing that. And then on top of that, then, that's kind of in terms of planting, in terms of sowing seed, that's kind of basically the list. As I say, it's quite short. We will of course move on to the perennial ones next week maybe, or the week after, and hopefully look at a grow along that everybody can get involved in. Other jobs that we can do at the moment. So obviously harvesting is still really, really, there's a lot to be harvested, a lot of crops coming in. Uh, there's pretty much everything is ready. A lot of the beds are still full. You'll be starting to come under pressure with tomato and blight, especially if the rain comes and if the light levels go down and we're getting less sunlight. You'll have to watch out for blight. Keep those tomatoes, keep those leaves off it. Any signs of blight, get them out of the greenhouse, and keep on top of all those things. Keep watering and feeding. Potentially you can get, you're going to be able to harvest right up until November on your tomatoes, all going well, but keep them fed, keep them watered, and watch out for blight developing. Other pests at this time of the year, keep your tunnel as clean as possible. So if you have anything that's starting to go over, it's time to be cleaning out your tunnel. Keep it as clean as possible. Get your husbandry right, because at this stage of the year, you will get insects that will be starting to look to move inward, and you potentially will start to build up problems in your greenhouse at this stage of the year. So keep that clean as much as possible. If something's gone, get rid of it, get it onto your compost heap, and then that keeps the tunnel fresh. Don't be afraid to continue to sow, and then you'll have new stuff coming along. But don't allow anything to sit around in your polytunnel. The other thing that can happen with polytunnels at this time of the year, greenhouses this time of the year, is that people make their harvest, they take out some of their crops, and they forget about it. They don't water in there, and they don't, basically they do nothing in there or in the ground for a period of time. You're better off to keep something in the ground. And if you're not, cover it down, mulch it down, make sure you water it occasionally, because if that soil completely dries out over the next few months, then it's any soil life that's there is going to get killed off, and you're kind of starting from scratch in poor ground again next spring. So don't allow that to happen. Get it mulched down, get it watered, ensure that you continue to feed that soil life, and then next spring, if you are deciding that you're not going to utilize it all over the winter, or you're not going to utilize all your space over the winter, then at least when you go back into it next spring, it's ready to go. It's still healthy. The soil is healthy. The soil life is still going. Um, so yeah, they're kind of the important jobs. As I say, it's have to been a really, really good year for growing, generally speaking. And yeah, that's the seed sowing guide for September. Definitely no need to do one in October. I'll probably mention in some of the episodes, a few things that you can be doing, but there isn't enough seeds to be sowing to have a standalone episode on the seed sowing guide for October. So that's the last one of these for the year, albeit that we are going to do the perennial grow along. Still need to figure out how we're going to execute that, I suppose, but I'll let you know on that in the coming days. Loads of people I mentioned on the podcast a few weeks back that I'd love the listeners to get in touch through Instagram, through email, whatever the case may be, and loads of people have got in touch. It's been really nice to hear from people that I didn't know, as I say, that listen to the podcast, that get benefit from the podcast. And as I say, really, really nice to hear from you guys, to hear your gardening stories, to hear how the podcast is helping you in your garden. And yeah, if anyone hasn't got in contact, please do. As I say, lovely to hear from you. Also, a couple of people are supported and continue to support on Buy Me a Coffee. That's really, really, I'm really grateful for that. It's basically, it's just a thing that you can buy a coffee to show your support of the podcast, and yeah, it keeps the show on the road, as I say. So lots of listeners have bought coffees over the last couple of months, and that is greatly appreciated. So that's been this week's episode. I'll be back next week or the week after with the grow along, and we'll keep you up to date on that. I think that could be a good one. I think that'll be something that people can sort of bring a bit of a community together. We can see people's journey from the sowing of the seed to right through to the flowers, hopefully next summer, and show you how easy it is to do that, to create perennial plants just by sowing a few seeds. Uh, as I say, the mechanics of it, I'll confirm over the next week, but we'll probably draw up a list of maybe sort of 10 or 15 really, really popular perennials that most people will enjoy or like in their garden. And then everybody can choose, 3 or 4 from that, and we'll work from there. I'll show you how to do the sowing, how to nurture them. We'll do a couple of maybe lives over that period of time to show people how to tend to them, how to look after them, and then how we can get them out into the gardens next year. And then hopefully we'll see fully fledged in flower perennial borders, all from a few packets of seed. And I think that would be a nice journey for you guys, the listeners, to take. So that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll tell you next time. Happy gardening.